Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Key Steps brought to you by the Advanced Workplace Institute. These are actually, as some of you know, very short 10-minute kind of discussions which allow the audience to participate via chat. Now, besides the famous slap that we all know about, what has been happening over the last few months? The great resignation. Now of the millions of people who have actually been quitting their jobs, about 20% say that it is because of a lack of flexibility within their organizations, as pointed out in a recent survey. Another 54% or so say that they would consider leaving their jobs if they're not provided with some form of flexibility regarding when and where they work from. Now, all of this makes hiring and retaining talent more than a small challenge, right? But it's not really so bad. There are some promising opportunities out there for organizations. What are the key steps to ride these times? So for a quick 10-minute discussion on the topic, we have with us live from San Francisco, Nida Mehtab. Oh, by the way, I'm Partha. Nida is a senior associate at Advanced Workplace Associates. Hi, Nida. Welcome to Key Steps.
Hi, Partha. Thank you for having me. Fantastic topic.
Lovely to have you here. Okay, so before I go to you, Nida, just a quick word for the audience. I and Nida will speak initially for about 10 minutes or so. Type in your questions or comments in the chat box as we speak, and we'll bring it up on the screen. So it's like actually watching television, and you get to see your comments on the screen. And Nida will then respond to that live. Okay. So Nida, thanks for joining. And my the topic really is about knowledge workers who
Mhm.
have become so very demanding post COVID, right? They would
Mhm.
rather have flexibility to work from anywhere than be attracted by good paycheck. So how do you attract and retain talent in a hybrid world, Nida? Key steps.
Sure, sure. No, this is a loaded question, but I think that in the you were mentioning before I came visible to the audience that the Great Resignation happened. So how do organizations bring the employees back and attract that talent and retain that talent? And there's another notion out there and a trend going on. There's a great regret that is happening as well. So when people reassessed and reevaluated their life choices, then yes, maybe most of the cases those choices were right. In some cases, they're also figuring out if this is time to go back to work and go back to the organizations that they left. But we're not going to talk about that today. What we're going to talk about is the post-COVID world. How do organizations attract and retain talent? And I think the most important part about is that people don't usually join the organizations for the paycheck, as you rightly said, even though that is a bigger factor. But post Great Resignation, people are joining the or employees are joining the organizations that are more aligned to their purpose of life. They are also joining the organizations for their culture. Culture has become a very core focus of why organizations are able to attract and retain more talent. And I'll give you an example that you cannot measure culture in as tangible way as you can that okay 50% people said that they're going to be working 3 days a week post covid. Culture is embodied and role modeled by the leadership of the organizations. So what has become really prevalent is that leadership needs to be trained and should really consider that how would they align the way they manage and lead the organizations through to become their employer of choice. The other thing that has become prevalent is that how do people really manage the hybrid workforce. Some employees will still continue to be remote. Some people will come for a fraction of the time, but how they needs to be managed has to be equitable. So that culture has to be translated into the processes to make that equitable experience for the entire workforce. And I think if organizations can master that, and it's not an easy thing to do, I think leaders are also learning how to manage the virtual workforce. I think once we are able to say as an organization we are mastering that, employees are not going to want to leave.
I like the fact that you say that people join organizations to see if they can actually align their beliefs in life with the organization's culture. Okay, wow, that's deep. I don't know if that really works with somebody who's just graduated out of university and he needs that paycheck badly. But nonetheless, we don't want to get into a debate on that. But having said that, you spoke about culture. And the fact that organizations have had to retune themselves, retune their culture, maybe.
Mhm.
I don't know if you agree with that. And do you see any common traits emerging out of this that organizations have had to retune, or kind of press the reset button on the cultural aspect itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Partha. I think what we're seeing is that it's not about retuning. It's more about how do we evolve out of what we thought was working, even though it wasn't working, but we were just all not too open to acknowledging that. I mean, we still have low 60%, not more than 60% average utilization rate, and employees were still leaving the organizations. But the pandemic has brought some key areas to the light, especially for leadership. So how they are evolving is they're trying to understand that they're trying to understand employee sentiment more and see that how can they pivot to align with what employees are wanting to see within an organization. So that's one thing. Employees have a much louder voice in forming the future culture. The other thing we're seeing is that training, learning, and development, that has become at the key and the core of the organization and how they're evolving. And that has to happen at all levels, the executive leadership level, the people managers level, and at the employees level. Because in the end, the organization has to function like one ecosystem. So, how do you do that if you miss out the whole chunk of your population, which are employees, and only train the leaders? So, that needle has to be threaded along where everyone comes on the same page to create that equitable experience. So these are the two key things that we are absolutely seeing, besides the fact that flexibility is not going to go away. Now, how every organizations really absorb that or embrace that flexibility, it will be a shade different from one organization to another organization, but it is here to stay.
Listening to people and then communicating change to the people, like you mentioned. I mean, this has been something which we heard even before the pandemic, right? But I'm sure things are different now. How is it different in the kind of projects that you've worked? I mean, these are big words, but has it really changed at the HR level, at the people level, in the projects that you've been working on? And how so, if it is?
Sure, no, that's great because um, I think in my lifetime of working experience, I never saw that the workplace leaders and the HR leaders and the people leaders actually even had a seat at the table. So when you not have a seat at the table, you're not privy to all those
Right.
um,
Hmm.
strategic discussions and thought process that an organization needs to take into account to take the organization forward. So if HR, people, organizations, and workplace and real estate organizations were just responding to the business needs instead of being on the table to share that, being a thought partner, they were not given that space to operate to be your strategic partner. So that's one area that we have seen changing. People leaders have a seat at the table. They are part of driving the business strategy forward. And I read that billboard the other day that said that business strategy is people strategy, which is true because I mean we when the industrialization happened and all of that, that was a different way of approaching people as an asset. Now knowledge workers are the greatest asset that is going to take our, I mean, it's going to sound a little profound, but it's going to take our civilization forward and a species forward. So we need to take into account.
Indeed, indeed, it will. In fact, I mean, if you really remove all the frills of business, it's all about people, isn't it? That's what it is all about. So, one quick word for the audience. You can type in your questions in the chat box if you see that. And so we've spent about 10 minutes now. I can take a pause here and wait for your questions to come in. By the way, if anybody would like to become an AWM member, you can write to me. So that's my email ID. You can write to us, and then I'll let you know how to become a member. AWM members actually get access to a variety of events like workshops, roundtables, and leaders forums. And if you'd like to become a member, write to me. On the same topic of culture and talent, in fact, we have another extensive webinar on the 12th of April. So that's the one that you see on your screen. And we do encourage all of you to actually register for that. We have a very good panel coming up for that on the 12th. Okay, so back to you. All right, good. It's kind of tricky, bringing that screen up and down. Okay,
Sure.
that's very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so Is there a question coming? Just a second. I'm just watching this
Partha,
question.
while you're watching, I'm just going to add a plug to that. The
Yes,
webinar that you just shared on the screen, I would highly encourage everyone to watch that. We're lucky to have a really great minds on one panel here. Lisa Whitehead, who is an amazing people advocate and culture advocate. Brad is another person who is actually understands the ins and outs of HR, and so is Lisa Sargent. So you're going to be missing out if you won't join that webinar.
indeed. Okay, so we have an interesting question now. If you can read that on the question of paycheck versus purpose, I'd read that the younger generation are more interested in working for organizations that align with their ideas and purpose. Are you, sorry, it's too small for me, getting old. Are you seeing that reflected in organizations you work with?
I'm ready to answer that.
Yes, that's for you. The
I was
question that's supposed to be my job is easier. You're supposed to answer the question.
Karen, thank you so much for this great question. As much as I would have liked to say that, no, it's not trickled down, but yes, it's in our immediate client circle, the partner circle. This is becoming a very, very hot trend, for lack of a better term, that all the people who have been actually helping their organizations get ready for post-COVID world, in that process they have become more clearer about what their choices in life are and what the purpose of their life they want to be, and is that equitable, is that aligned with the company purpose. So in my immediate circle, I have seen at least uh, I would say 2 to 5% people who have actually either switched jobs or taken a break to understand how do they want to get engaged in the with the organizations doing the work that will keep them closer to the core of what they want to do. People are becoming extremely conscious of the climate change, saving the planet, because as one of my dear friends say, planet is burning. Thank you, Lisa. So we got to get on the bandwagon, otherwise we are not going to leave a very sustainable planet for our generations to come. So to answer your question, yes, I'm seeing a lot of that happening.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist. In fact, I would have imagined the other, it happening the other way around, that younger people would actually be more interested in the paycheck. Okay, so we have another interesting question from Jennifer. And can you see that on your screen? How should
Yeah,
organizations manage and deliver on the expectations of Gen Z employees entering the workplace and balance these against current and perhaps older employees?
yeah.
Okay.
How
We
the
have
organization?
how many generations working in the office now? But
Well,
three, four?
I think there are four now because the
Yes.
Gen
How do you
Alpha
balance all of that? Yeah.
Gen
Yeah.
Alpha is the new one that's entering the workforce. So, how should organizations manage and deliver on the expectations of Gen Z employees entering the workplace and balance these against current, perhaps older employees? So, I think, I may be not quoting the statistic right, but I think 50% of the workforce, if not 75%, by 2025 is going to be millennials and the generations X, Generation Y, and Generation Alpha. So, given that in mind, organizations are reassessing their toolkit, their methods, and their infrastructure. Is it ready to receive those future generations in their workforce? Succession plans, organizational redesigning. A lot of organizations are changing their structure from hierarchical to make it more flat, to create that level of collaboration that flat organization really allows. Um, and Jennifer, this is a great question because it's two part. How do they balance these against current, perhaps older employees? um, I think the current and the older employees, or people who have been in the workforce for a longer time, they are also understanding the need of upskilling themselves to be more relevant and in tune with what future really needs for the work from the workforce. Digital transformation is a very big example of that, and I think the pandemic has really accelerated that curve at a very fast pace. So that it's not just the organization who is actually doing something to embrace the future generations, but it's also the current and the previous employees are also upping their skills to become more in tune with what the future holds.
Right. Indeed, I agree with that. Well, Nida, I'd like to actually go on this topic, which is beginning to kind of get warmed up. But we promise our people, promise our audience that we'll keep it short and sweet. So it's time to say bye bye, unless we have any last questions. No, we don't. And we hopefully managed to ignite some thoughts in the audience mind, leave you with some thoughts that you may want to write back to us about if you have any additional thoughts or you want to add to the conversation. um, and thank you, Nida, for your time today. Thank you so much. And audience, thanks to you for joining us. Thanks to Jennifer and thanks to Karen for those questions and keeping this conversation so interactive. And thanks for co-creating this session. Thanks, Nida. Any last
Thank
words?
you. No, thank you so much for having me. And even though I see Karen has another question, Karen, I'm happy to
Oh yes,
answer that question.
let's take that. Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay.
All right. Well, then I'm going to hold my bye, Partha.
Yes, indeed. So, do you
So,
think organizations will be forced to get more comfortable with people staying with them for a shorter amount of time than in the past? I
mm,
wonder if people will move around more, which will give organizations a turnover recruitment headache.
people
Indeed,
will
I
move
think
around
what's
more.
the
Yeah.
average stay of people now? 6 months, 1 year, 2 years?
Well, it's funny because I was having this conversation yesterday with some of my colleagues, and it turned out I think what we are seeing is that in tech sector, turnover rate is significantly higher. But to actually answer Karen's question, Karen, yes, I think the organizations, while they are becoming more and more comfortable with people with the higher turnover rate within their organizations, they're also doing more and more and investing in ways how they can prolong that the employees stay in their organizations, which is why you're seeing a lot of those things that were not a part of workplace offering in the past is now a part of workplace offering. Mental health breaks. The Google has just announced that they have extended their paternity leave and the maternity leave as well. So things like that, how to really allow workforce to be more with what they want to do, doing things that they want to do, has really allowed people to see things more as a package to make a decision if they want to stay with an organization for longer or not. There are also another aspect to it. For different sectors, turnover rate is different, of course. But even within sectors, the type of employees are also they also show a very different turnover rate. And I'm going to give you an example of financial institutes or organizations that have contact centers. Contact center turnover rate is significantly higher than the other workforce within any sector, and that could be because there's just less of the knowledge management that needs to happen, but also because there's more demand right now given organizations who are moving toward the digital transformation. They're also outsourcing a lot of their in-house capabilities to the contact center. So yes, while organizations are becoming more and more comfortable, they're also becoming more and more aware that they need to do something to extend that workforce stay in their organization.
We like to say these things are 10 minutes, but we always have question is making one. We have one more question, so we will
All
take
right,
that
let's take
question.
it.
We will take that question. But I have a question before that. And you spoke about the workplace, changes at the workplace. But in terms of the physical workplace, in fact, every month we pick up a topic and around that we have different events. And next month we have a topic which is around workplace redesign, the place
Mm,
itself. And the whole world has been inspired by the kind of tech offices that you speak about, the Google office, and these are so many other offices in your part of the world, in the West
mm.
Coast. There were always these fancy offices that others actually aspired to make their offices like them. Have you actually seen any changes in the workplace? And I'm talking about the place itself.
Yeah. So one thing I would like us to all think about first is the um, workplace is an ecosystem, and that is a composition of the physical workspace, the technology experience, and also the policies and processes. And all these things actually come together to change the behaviors and mindsets of the workforce. Now, your question is specific to the physical workspace. Absolutely, Partha. And I want to again, I would encourage us to think of the workspace in a way that it's a living organism. It has to be built. it has to be designed in a way that allows that flexibility of growing and contracting as needed to support the business needs. We are seeing a lot of that. How workspace is being looked at is not as how many desks can you put in an office, but how many work points are there to support different. And work points are a combination of some workstations, some hot desking, some enclosed office spaces, some open collaboration spaces, some enclosed meeting spaces. They all come together to support anything that an employee can think of spending their time doing different activities in their day in the life experience. So yes, we are seeing a lot of autonomy coming to the employees in terms of the choice of spaces that they can use to support their work, but also how workspace is being designed is more of like a living organism. So I'll stop there, and I know there's another question.
Yeah. All right. So the next question, and in fact, next month, audience will be discussing a lot more on the workplace experience. So do join us next month.
Fantastic.
Okay, so question from Vejshri. Thanks for the question. No matter which generation it is, at the core of it, every person is looking for the same things: respect, validation, growth, and to be heard as an
Mhm.
equal and empathy. If we can keep this at the center of organization transformation, it'll probably be more. Okay, sorry.
Probably more acceptable across the table. What have you observed?
What
Yeah,
have you
great,
observed? Yeah. Right.
great question. And I would like to say that while in the past, these four things that you identified, respect, validation, growth, and to be heard, um, they were not at the center of any decision making that the organizations were making for their employees. Now, the really most impactful way for them to show respect to the employees is that making them a part of that the thinking process to co-develop the solutions and co-create the solutions that are needed to transform the organization. Because when an employee feel that they are able to provide feedback and they're able to be impact the decisions needed, that's the ultimate test of respect. You're not only validating me, you're hearing my voice, but you're also making this a part of how we take the organization going forward. So a piece of me and a part of me just gets attached to that organization, and I start feeling like I have such a higher sense of ownership and belonging. So yes, we are seeing a lot of that, and it wasn't obvious before pandemic, but organizations are learning, leadership is learning that they have to take the employees um, along the journey of making decisions of transformations.
I was just listening to and I suddenly remembered, oh, I have to moderate this. Okay, and there's one more question. So we will take that question. Okay.
Okay.
So for organizations, I love this, by the way. Please keep the questions coming. We can take more questions. With For organizations opting for a remote first model, can culture
Mm.
still strive, or does it rely on people coming together into the office? In your opinion, can culture transcend into the virtual world? Yeah, interesting. Okay, we are moving into the metaverse, right?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Jennifer. This is one of the areas that are very close to my heart. That how do we create remote first usually scare people thinking that the culture is going to erode. Now what is how do we think of culture is really dependent on the physical space, because I have witnessed many organizations where everyone is coming 5 days a week, but there's such a lack of trust. And because of that lack of trust, that knowledge sharing and there's no perceived sense of supervisory support, so it's still toxic. So as much as we would like to believe that the culture is a function of just the physical space, I really would encourage us to think about that culture is just one of the enablers. And I'm not going to name that client, but we have a very um, good and engaged client who we helped take develop their remote first strategy, which they have rolled out last month globally as well. They did not just focus on creating those spaces to bring in people in the remote first culture. They also invested and spent energy in how do we create that equitable experience, even that employee is at home or working from anywhere, because culture is reflected best in the way we collaborate with each other, in the ways the processes are looked at. The stronger the culture is, the less need of creating the structural hierarchy that is at the center of the organization. So um, I think while there is a perception that culture is going to erode, I think culture is going to open up to other areas to leverage the same energy that we otherwise associate with the physical workspace.
What a way to answer that question. Okay, so Vedashri says, absolutely, she agrees with your answer. Everyone loves your answer, you know. So thanks Vedashri, thanks Jennifer, thanks Karen for those questions and keeping this so interactive. Uh, well, thanks once again, Nida, for your time today, and have a good day. And speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, audience, once again. Do tune in next month, and remember, if like Nida said, thanks for the shout out. Try and register for this. You can write to me, and I'll help you register this. This is coming up on the 12th, so that's next week. Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Partha, for
and
having me.
it was a pleasure. And have a good day. Bye bye now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks